I'm Shannon Martin. Tonight we've learned one of the young families who died trying to cross into the U.S. had ties to Toronto.
A young family, quiet, with young children.
Two parents in their late 20s and their children, just 1 and 2 years old, were pulled from the St. Lawrence River. We'll take you to Scarborough, where a community is grieving.
We've received many emails, phone calls, asking, can you provide something around public transit safety?
Increasing calls for safety on the TTC 1 week after a 16-year-old boy was killed in a random attack. The experts weigh in on solutions from cell service system-wide to better social and mental health supports.
A new world record! Another world record! Summer Macintosh!
Powerhouse performances, Toronto's Summer Macintosh making a splash and breaking records, plus the Toronto Six celebrating their historic win, bringing home the Isabel Cup.
This is CBC Late Night News.
Hello, thanks for joining us. We are learning more tonight about the people who died trying to cross the St. Lawrence River. A family of 4, including a 1 and 2 year old, had ties to Toronto. Police say they were trying to get into the U.S. Katie Nicholson is in the First Nations community of Akwesasne, which is a gateway from Ontario and Quebec into New York State. That's where we begin our coverage.
A helicopter swoops low, searching the marsh. The beat of its blades, a steady reminder of tragedy.
It's like a big dark cloud over the res right now, so it's like, hopefully everybody gets through this shit.
It's been just a few short days since 8 bodies were pulled from these waters. People hoping for a new start in the U.S. Like Florin Iordake, who was refused asylum in Canada and was set to be deported. Family members planned to pick him and his young family up in New York. Now they are working on repatriating their bodies back to Romania. Iordake's children were baptized in this Toronto church.
They're a young family that walked in and wanting to baptize their children. And of course, we received them gladly.
And then there's the Chaudhry family, whose deaths in the ice-cold river are making headlines in their home state in India, Gujarat. But there is one person who still hasn't been found, Casey Oakes, last seen boarding a small boat like the one recovered near the bodies. Just one of many unanswered questions lingering with the grief felt deeply in this community.
Oh, sad, especially the babies and little children, yeah. Yeah, well, everybody's emotional probably right now.
And so they pull together. For Alice Thompson, that means making chicken noodle soup.
Just get together, help everybody out.
A small gesture to warm the crews, still out searching on the frigid water. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Akwesasne.
As you heard Katie say, the Romanian family had connections in Toronto. Meg Roberts is at a church in Scarborough where a community is mourning. Meg, what are you hearing?
Shannon, the Romanian Orthodox community in Scarborough is grieving those 2 children and their parents. I spoke with the priest here earlier this evening. He says the family didn't have close ties with the community, but he remembers baptizing them last summer.
They were a young family, quiet, with young children. Sometimes speaking with the members of our community, but not getting too close. They were quiet, and we could see that they're faithful.
That quiet family included 28-year-old Florin Iordake, his wife, and his 2 children, who were 1 and 2 years old.
We pray together for the repose of the departed, trying to comfort ourselves and trying to pray for their souls.
Police said Iordake had 2 Canadian passports in his possession at the time, 1 for each child. Family told CBC News the couple and children had been living in Canada for a year and a half and were trying to reunite with relatives in Florida. This morning's sermon, a memorial service for the family. Father Emmanuel Tankaluk says the community is completely shook up.
They were feeling deeply saddened, in tears, and at some point we had to have a moment and stop the sermon because I had to talk to them about it, and they were deeply, deeply, deeply saddened.
The church plans on holding another memorial service this coming Saturday. The family has told CBC News it hopes that they can send the bodies back to their hometown in Romania. Shannon.
Thanks, Meg. That's Meg Roberts reporting for us tonight in Toronto. Well, in other news, Ontario's police watchdog has been called in after a man died following an interaction with police in Brampton. The SIU says Peel police officers were called to a disturbance in the area of Kennedy Road and Vauden Street around 4 a.m. Here's what we know so far. According to the SIU, police arrived and apprehended a 34-year-old man under the Mental Health Act. The SIU says the man went into distress and had no vital signs shortly after. Officers performed first aid, but he was later pronounced dead in hospital. Meantime, Toronto police alerting the public after responding to 4 separate calls for suspected drug overdoses yesterday. Police say they all happened within 51 divisions, so that includes South Riverdale, Regent Park, and the Church and Yonge area. All are linked to the use of fentanyl being distributed in the downtown core. It's unclear right now how many of those overdoses were deadly and exactly where they happened. It was this time last week that we were learning the horrifying details of a 16-year-old boy stabbed to death inside a TTC station. The calls to make transit safer are increasingly louder. Patrick Swadden spent the day speaking with experts. He also shows us how some riders are taking action.
Grief for the teenager killed at Keele Station last week, turning into anxiety about how he died. It's led hundreds to sign up for self-defense classes offered here.
We've received many emails, phone calls, asking, can you provide something around public transit safety?
Christopher Gagne saying he's designed Krav Maga lessons specifically for TTC riders.
The first techniques were being pushed or pulled. From behind, being pushed in front of tracks, for instance, or in front of a road, our natural reflex is to reach out, right, and to step forward. We modify those techniques and to try to get off the line of attack, knife attacks, and under the stress of attack, you need to very reflexive and fast. So from there, we train you to follow the reflex with a little more aggression and strike at the same time. You want to disrupt the attack and get home safe, is the bottom line.
Something else that could make an immediate difference?
It turns out it's not the TTC that is failing to provide cell phone service in subway stations. It turns out it's the telecoms, the big telecoms.
Valverde says the infrastructure is there for large providers like TELUS and Rogers to supply cell service, something that's been floated for over a decade. She says it just needs political pressure to get it done. The city added more police to the subway in late January after more than 1,000 violent incidents on the TTC last year alone, a dramatic increase over the previous year.
You can't sort of police your way out of a social problem.
Jennifer Chambers advocates on behalf of people with mental health and addictions. She says the city doesn't have enough supports for its residents, leading many to turn to the TTC just for refuge.
The population has been growing, but the services to support the population hasn't been growing along with people.
There's a sense that people are so frustrated and feeling abandoned about that they're giving up on hope that these systems will ever deliver and support them as they need it.
Dr. Sandy Simpson says some Ontario support programs only fund people to 60% of the poverty line, and the structural poverty can make people desperate, leading to more violence in public.
The only way we're going to get out of this sort of problem is if we start to improve the recognition of how desperate life is and do something about it.
Simpson saying things like universal basic income would help with food and housing insecurity. Experts agreeing the problem is systemic, with not one silver bullet. Patrick Swadden, CBC News, Toronto.
Safety on the TTC is already a top issue in the race for the mayor's chair. We've heard at least one candidate talk about getting system-wide cell service on transit. Well, nominations to run in the by-election open first thing tomorrow morning. Let's bring in Toronto Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords to help us unpack where things stand. Sean, we've got a former police chief, high-profile councillors past and present, and some MPPs adding their names in. What's the contest looking like so far?
Well, Shannon, I think it's going to be a very, very crowded race, as you've just mentioned. I mean, we have former Police Chief Mark Saunders, we have MPP Mitzi Hunter, we have some former city councillors in Anna Bailau, and we've got current city councillors also vying for the seat in Brad Bradford and Josh Matlow. Now, those are just the declared candidates. Who knows, we may have a larger pack register on Monday. I mean, traditionally, mayoral elections have 60 to 70 candidates. Now, mind you, not all of those are top tier candidates, but it will mean that the field is packed and there's going to be a lot of action and, frankly, a pretty vigorous debate over the next couple of months. And I think it's going to be a race that really is pretty energetic compared to the race we saw last fall.
Yeah, for sure. You know, there's such a crowded field. What sort of challenges does that pose?
You know, I think what we'll all be watching for is policy. We're really going to want to see what ideas these new candidates bring to the fore and how they deal with the city's fiscal situation. I mean, this week at City Hall, we had a staff report to council really outline the challenges that the city is going to face over the next decade. Now, that's $46 billion in financial pressures. That means that it's going to make it more difficult for the city to finance its services, to pay down its debt, and to build capital projects and fix its roads. So all of these candidates are going to be making promises. All of those promises will cost money, and I think people will be asking, how will all of these candidates pay for these things in light of that fiscal situation and in light of the city's books?
Okay, Sean, thanks so much. A busy day for him tomorrow, and we're just getting started, really. He's reporting for us in Toronto. Well, also happening at City Hall tomorrow, a debate on whether to make High Park car-free. The city is considering 4 options, including time-based road closures and full road closures with no vehicles. Advocates are hoping for a permanent ban on cars, saying that would make the park more accessible and help the environment. Anwar is back with us tonight, and boy, oh boy, was it chilly out there today. It's been such a roller coaster.
Yeah, fasten your seatbelts. The ride's not done yet, Shannon, that's for sure. It was a cold dose of vitamin D, no doubt about it. You know, we woke up to -5 with a wind chill of -11 this morning, well below the seasonal mark. But I bear some gifts, some good news. More on that in just a moment. Currently, looking at some cloud across the region. And you know what? Embedded in that, some moisture along this front. There may be some flurries. It's not going to amount to much, but nonetheless, we're still talking about flurries. I mean, it's a November feel to an April day. So this is what we're seeing across the board for the overnight. And then as the kids head off to class tomorrow morning, 4 degrees, feeling like -1, but mom and dad, let me do this favor for you and let you know that the kids should layer tomorrow. The last thing they're going to want to do is wear their toque and their winter coat by lunchtime recess, because we have a huge warm up on the way. In fact, it will feel about 25 degrees warmer tomorrow afternoon than it did early this morning. Have all the details coming up, but now Shannon will send it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Anwar. What a switch. Welcome back. Some major sports celebrations to tell you about on the ice and in the pool. That's where we start with 16-year-old swimming sensation Summer McIntosh. She crushed the competition yet again, this time on the final night of the Canadian trials. Lisa Shing has more on her world record-breaking performances.
A new world junior record, a new Canadian record in the women's 200-meter freestyle Summer McIntosh.
5 events, 5 record-breaking performances. Summer McIntosh has been called a once-in-a-generation talent, and this week, the humble athlete demonstrated why.
And to achieve something like this that I dreamed of just a few years ago that I never thought was going to happen, and now that it did, it was a very unexpected too. I never thought I was going to break the 400 free world record tonight. It blows my mind.
At just 16, Toronto's McIntosh stunned the swimming world with 2 world records at the National Swimming Trials, the 400-meter individual medley and the 400-meter freestyle. She's also lowered the world, junior, and Canadian records in the 200-meter butterfly and the 200-meter freestyle.
I'm pretty exhausted at this point, but it's been a lot of fun.
Cheering her on every meter of the way, young fans, her parents, sister, and her coach.
Her journey, and it's really just starting, right? She'll be able to do whatever she wants to do in this sport.
McIntosh is one of many world-class swimmers on the Canadian women's team. This new golden age, a result of a decade-old data-driven system where Swimming Canada identifies athletes early, then develops them. Penny Oleksiak, Canada's most decorated Olympic swimmer, was one of those high-potential athletes. McIntosh was spotted when she was just 11.
We can find those athletes earlier in the system, work and nurture what we do with them, rather than wait and leave it to chance. So.
The Canadian team is looking for an outstanding summer at the World Championships in Fukuoka, Japan, then on to next year's Olympic Games in Paris. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Amazing. Okay, to the ice next. The Toronto Six returned home as heroes, crowned champs at the Isabelle Cup for the very first time. The team making all sorts of history in the world of women's professional hockey.
These are your 2023 Isabelle Cup champions, the Toronto Six.
It's starting to set in for all of us, especially coming back home into our own city, bringing the cup into our home arena. It feels really good, but we're feeling like champions, and our city is welcoming us just like that. We've got a strong group of girls that are majority Canadian, and a lot of us are from the GTA, so it's so important for us to bring it here for the little girls in our communities.
Like just for even my daughter to be able to see that, one day she could be that professional player, and I think that's really key. That's really important for the young girls to be able to dream.
I've seen so many kids attending this game, and I'm not a child, but I just feel equally inspired as much as all the fans to be supporting the first huge win, but just a women's team in general.
It's a huge opportunity, the fact that they can dream about doing the same thing that they did and make a career out of it.
I never thought that I'd play for, a Toronto women's professional hockey team and bring a championship home to Toronto, so it's just a dream come true. When I was their age, 10 years old, 8 years old, I didn't have any pro women's hockey team to look up to, so I think this is really special for them to be able to, see us and meet us and dream that one day they can play for a pro women's team and make money.
I look up to these girls so much, and it's really cool to see them do this for the girls and for the next generation.
It just inspires us to keep our dream, and that our dreams can turn into a reality if we just keep practicing and try our hardest.
There you go. Okay, taking a live look tonight at the CN Tower, shining gold and yellow for World Autism Awareness Day. The UN says the goal is to highlight the need to help improve the quality of life of those with autism. We are heading into a commercial break. Anwar is back with your full forecast straight ahead. Welcome back. A temple in Caledon is helping young people discover the Sikh martial art of Gutka.
The main thing most parents want is to have their kids connect with the religion and stay intact with that as they grow up, so they can carry on that lineage where they come from. So if that, for us, that's from Punjab, so it's for them to carry that on even in the Western world.
There are free classes every week in an effort to connect the next generation with their heritage. Gutka is a traditional form of martial art practiced in the Sikh community. It combines self-defense and acrobatics. More than 100 traditional weapons are used, but a wooden stick is most common during practice. Well, tomorrow is a very big day for getting back to the moon. NASA and the Canadian Space Agency will unveil the names of the astronauts heading to the moon, including a Canadian. The Artemis 2 mission will blast off in November 2024. 4 astronauts, including a Canadian, will loop around the moon during the first ever human lunar mission since Apollo 17 back in December 1972. If all goes well, the hope is to land 2 astronauts on the moon in 2025. It is all part of a bigger plan to set up a space station orbiting the moon and eventually get humans to Mars. Very exciting day tomorrow, and also this 25-degree leap we're expecting.
Yeah, it's going to be quite something. Now, you know, they didn't mention that it's a one-way trip to Mars, you know, when you talk about we're all going to Mars. But anyway, I digress. Yes, you know, there's that old saying, Shannon, misery loves company. Today, it was a miserable day in the temperature department, but it was bright skies. But we weren't the only one. You know, we have pretty well coast-to-coast temperatures are below seasonal, and there's some snowfall. At least we're not dealing with anything major. You know, southern Alberta is going to get around 10 centimeters, maybe 15 in southern Manitoba. So, you know, there's a cold trend, but we're the bright, warm spot, certainly for tomorrow in southern Ontario. And we're talking across the country. So we have this weak system that's moving in, and it will start off with a strong southerly flow. So that's going to be warm air coming from the south. It'll be gusty winds up to 50 kilometers an hour. That'll bring the values. And you can see what happens as we put things in motion here. So we have the frontal passage and then a trough line that's going to move down. That generates the cloud cover and some rain showers. Now, yes, there may be a hit and miss shower earlier in the day, but for the most part, this is an evening overnight event for tomorrow, and especially down to the southwest. So I wouldn't bother with an umbrella unless you're doing something in the evening. But look at the values ahead of this system with that southerly flow. 15 at Pearson, Hamilton, 15 in Sarnia, 16 in Windsor with some rain showers. Beautiful stuff here. Not record-breaking, but still well above where we should be, that's for sure. So the 7-day trend, this is where it gets interesting. 15 degrees. Predominantly dry, except for the evening. Rain showers on Tuesday. Wednesday is another Colorado low. Now, we spoke about this yesterday. It's going to do 2 things. One, it's also going to bring in a lot of heat energy. I think we will score our first 20-degree day of the year, not only in Ontario, but in the country. It's been about a decade since we've been so late for a 20-degree day. I think Windsor will get it, but we'll get 13 with rain showers and possibly stormy conditions in cottage country. And then it's back to cooler averages for Easter weekend. Shannon, have a good night.
News. Thanks, Anwar. Nice having you with us.
Thank you.
That's our show for you tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next weekend.